This next person I'm going to introduce is impossible for me to exaggerate about. There's no one in the world outside of my family that means more to me. If it were not for this man, I would not exist. There would be no Penn and Teller. Oh, fuck it. Amazing Randi! I'm sorry, I just can't pull it together.
Finished shooting now? Yeah. I can't hold this in my hand. You notice they always lower the microphone for me. I can't understand how that is or why, but I take it in stride. Ladies and gentlemen, I am very pleased to again be present at a Reason rally, and Margaret Downey is one of the persons I have to thank for that, for facilitating it. I want to speak to you today about the farce known as facilitated communication, FC, which involves what's now most often called autism spectrum disorder, ASD, a subject that deeply concerns me. The first ever fully identified and defined example of autism was only found in 1941. But humanists and skeptical communities need to be very aware of this, and something must be done about it. The facilitated communication stunt is claimed to be a means of communicating with autistic children and adults afflicted by this complex neurological condition. ASD victims show widely varying degrees of impaired social interaction and communication, avoidance of eye contact, and strangely restricted and compulsive repetitive behavior. These symptoms show up before a child is 3 years old and can become much stronger and more dangerous to that person's well-being, though many mature into adulthood and survive with difficulty. The U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention estimate that 1 in 45 persons in this country can be said to have at least some degree of autism. This is a figure that demands our very serious consideration. Different authorities and quite unqualified celebrity figures have argued that the mercury compounds once used as preservatives in some vaccines triggered it. Specifically, the measles, mumps, rubella, MMR vaccine, a notion now completely disproven, but still embraced by some. In March 1992, I was contacted by Dr. Ann M. Donnellan, then with the University of Wisconsin-Madison, who told me about a situation in which she was deeply involved. What little I already knew about FC indicated to me that she was very, very misdirected and self-deceived. I told her that the security of the children involved in this research must have priority, of course, and stated that if I became part of the investigation, that would have to be the primary consideration. I also said that I would gladly participate without any remuneration other than my basic costs of travel and accommodation. She explained to me the difficulty of communication with the autistic children due to apraxia, the inability to perform simple coordinated physical actions, though the muscular ability is present. She told me that facilitated communication consists of the facilitator, an adult clinician or scientist, being in physical contact with the child, while the child has access to an augmentative device, a computer keyboard, typewriter, alphabet blocks, letter chart, etc., which the child would be unable to manipulate sufficiently well to communicate. She said that certain children had shown remarkable abilities under FC, expressing ideas and concepts that had formerly been believed to be far beyond their abilities. Well, I told her that I felt the researchers might be under the influence of the clever Hans effect, in which the facilitator, in this case, might be unknowingly transmitting the sought-after responses to the child. This suggestion was emphatically denied, and I was told that every care had been taken to ensure that this was not possible. Her enthusiasm for this point was quite contagious, but I was immune to such an infection. I'd already seen several videos of facilitated communication procedure being used on autistic kids. The adult facilitator grasps the hand, get this picture now, grasps the hand of the child with the child index finger extended out over the keyboard of the computer. In almost every case, the child is looking away, uninvolved in the procedure, often babbling or screaming as the facilitator studies the keyboard and simply uses the subject's finger as the tool with which he or she is typing. It's abundantly obvious that the child is not typing. No, the facilitator is typing using that child's finger. However, another reported phenomena that was reported to me, well, particularly in view of my own expertise, I was told that several of these children claimed that they were able to read minds. Yeah, sure. They were able, I was told, to thereby communicate with one another. The major reason for Dr. Donnellan having asked me to visit and advise the group, since as a result of my expertise as a magician, I should be able to determine whether telepathy might be in operation. I went to Madison fully aware of what was happening there before I took on the task, believe me. Now, via the internet, anyone can freely order diet drugs and a large variety of items that are said to enhance athletic performance. If any problems are reported with such projects, the FDA can ask that they be withdrawn from the market. But hold on, the FDA requests that the product be withdrawn? They don't order its removal from sale? No, the FDA can't require that a product be intensively, independently examined because they haven't the necessary budget. So that quackery is just freely offered for sale. FDA surveillance and/or testing is limited by the huge size of the internet industry and the lack of legal empowerment and resources to examine products before they're put on sale. The number of supplements alone is estimated at from 40,000 to 75,000, including everything from vitamin C to weight loss products, which means that neither the FDA nor the FTC can keep track of them. And anyone, anywhere in the world can set up a web sales page with a US address on it and safely stay out of the reach of the law. I agreed to participate in an investigation of both these situations, though, please note, I was regularly being encouraged not to examine the basic facilitated communication, the FC claim itself, but I'd already seen it all in operation and I doubted its efficacy. I was assured that all that had been firmly established. This task required that I visit Madison to observe the children in person. Believing that I could be of use to the project, I agreed. Now, Dr. Douglas Bicklin of the University of Syracuse has promoted the FC procedure as valid. Quite an error, in my opinion. You may have seen the very definitive, powerful video prepared and broadcast by PBS, very damning evidence against FC. In this documentary, the autistic subjects are looking away, quite unaware and disinterested in what is being asked of them. The fact that the supporters of the FC notion also saw this proves that they are ignoring the very strong evidence that the data originates with the facilitator. It does not come from the child at all. FC is not communication, it is manipulation. Dr. Bicklin founded his university's Facilitated Communication Institute in 1992. In August of 2005, he was promoted to Dean of their School of Education, from which he retired in 2014. This appointment was strongly criticized by the Commission for Scientific Medicine and Mental Health and by members of the special education research community. In 2012, Bicklin received a United Nations Prize that was awarded him because of his advocacy of FC, which again had been so very, very thoroughly and effectively debunked as wishful thinking, bad science, and nonsense on the 1993 TV special on PBS Frontline, as well as through my personal investigation and experience with this manipulative deception the year before in 1992. But please, you must remember the financial investment that Syracuse University still has in FC via Dr. Bicklin. It brings in millions annually from desperate parents and charities. Dr. James T. Todd invited me to speak at Eastern Michigan University in 2005, and as a result, he issued a direct challenge to the Autism Society over its sponsorship of a facilitated communication training workshop. Two of the attendees at that workshop, the Wendrows, were falsely accused via facilitated communication of rape of a child. They were arrested and jailed. But I must wonder whether the Wendrows' naive acceptance of SC and their previous vigorous denunciation of me and my ideas remained in effect after they had themselves experienced firsthand the damage that it can wreak. The Wendrows sued and they got $1.85 million in settlement. This situation was covered last year in a 6-day front page story in the Detroit Free Press and an ABC TV 2020 show. As chief supporters of FC at the University of Syracuse and the force behind getting the MIT Media Lab to host Dr. Douglas Bicklin's annual Facilitated Communications Summer Institute, those communication experts and scientists at the MIT Media Lab ought to have been the very first to reject the idea of facilitated communication. I've spoken there several times, but it appears that some of its staff are true believers in FC, and some are significantly beholden to certain supporters of FC for financial support. The MIT Media Lab endorsement of the facilitated communication farce is very disturbing, very discouraging and alarming to me. I just cannot understand how such a splendid facility can give approval to this dangerous and useless procedure. I always stood ready to design and conduct comprehensive tests at FC, and I still do. But apparently the money interests have been more successful, having spoken louder than rationality. And in closing, I will tell you that in my early correspondence with Dr. Dunn, I learned that one of the autistic children she said I would be meeting in Madison, a 6-year-old boy named Andrew, had been banging his head on the floor, a not uncommon practice of autistic children at the far end of the spectrum. And when the child got in front of the keyboard and was asked why he did the head banging, he answered, by assisted typing, remember, that his head hurt. Asked why his head hurt, he typed out, correctly spelled, they claim, because you need to operate on my hypothalamus. This from a 6-year-old child and correctly spelled? Do these scientists really believe this report? Folks, apparently they do. Thank you, reasonable people. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay.
The amazing Randy!
James Randi, ladies and gentlemen.
International war was really influenced by the planets. My first guest is an astrologer whose work is read by millions of people in Britain every day. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Jonathan Kaner. Tell me, Jonathan, who do you write for?
I write for Today newspaper in this country, Today newspaper, Woman magazine, Mirabella, and Living.
I have a question for you. You know, are we really supposed to believe that everything you write for, say, a Capricorn is going to happen to 1/12 of the total population of the world that next day?
Well, let me ask you something, James. You come from the other side of the Atlantic, would you say that Canadians and Americans have different characteristics to each other?
Yes, they do.
So up to a point, there are differences between Capricorns and Aquarians, and certain things I can say about them, but I would, as is obvious from what I've just asked you, say that there are also a lot of things you couldn't say just from that kind of information.
Well, how would you do a more accurate reading?
All right, well, to do that, you're going to need somebody's date of birth, their time of birth, and their place of birth, and then you're going to need to draw up a great big map of the sky, and by analysing where all the different planetary positions are, you can start to say something that makes a lot more personal sense.
So you say that a reading of this kind would be accurate and individual enough for the person to recognize themselves?
I would hope so.
All right. Well, Jonathan has kindly agreed to put his talents to the test this evening. We have taken the birth date information from every person in the audience tonight, and before the show, we gave you the details of one person selected from that audience. So please give us your reading for that person.
Okay, well, I don't know who I'm addressing here, but I know that the person who owns the horoscope that I've been looking at has a very unusual horoscope. This horoscope is unusual, and it suggests to me that you are a very extrovert person, unusual, larger than life, full of confidence, with a very zany sense of humor, and generally a kind of way of being different, eccentric, controversial. You will kind of enjoy the limelight that comes from when it's revealed that it's you. You won't feel too shy or ashamed of it. And one more thing I should also say, there's something about you which is rather professorial and intellectual, and it makes me think that we're dealing with someone who's had a well-trained mind, is very speedy and alert and quick-witted.
So we're looking for someone who's controversial and professorial. Now, let's see if he or she agrees, but first, let's see by a show of hands in the audience here, how many people in the audience think this reading sounds like theirs? Let's see a show of hands. Well, we've got, what, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, about 15, maybe a few more. Quite a few, actually. Now, let's meet our real subject of that reading. Please welcome Hugh Laurie. And Hugh is accompanied this evening by a gentleman he hardly knows, Stephen Fry. So tell us, Hugh, what did you make of that reading? Is it anything like you? I mean, does it apply to you?
I wouldn't say very much, no. I'm certainly not enjoying the limelight now. Although you may say, why did I come up? Well, curiosity, you know, but limelight, I wouldn't say, no. Extrovert, I don't think so. Professorial, I got the lowest possible degree at the university I went to.
Ah, but you did go to university.
Oh, that's right.
Well, that's a start.
Oh, that's
that's one for me.
You think you count that as one for you, do you?
Well, just a small one
you're
for
very
me,
generous
I think,
to yourself.
yeah.
I call that a draw, yeah, all right. What else was there?
Did I say you had a good sense of humor? I think I did.
Hands up in this audience who thinks they have not got a sense of humor.
Oh,
There you go. Everybody. It's one of the rules of the world that everybody believes themselves to have a great
yes,
sense of
but
humor.
I picked it out as being a strong point in the gentleman's horoscope.
It would have been a brilliant one of me, incidentally. That's the odd thing. People do regard me as professorial in some way or another. Hugh isn't at all. He's certainly not extrovert. And
stupid. Stupid, in fact.
I wouldn't get together, but not in the least bit stupid. Very intelligent, but not in a professorial or academic kind of way. And certainly not competent. In fact, I seem to spend a good 90% of my life trying to make you more competent. He gets nervous and he despises it.
I think you do your friend a grave injustice. I've looked at his horoscope and I'm sure he's capable of far more than that.
Yeah, well, I've looked at him, you see.
Well, Jonathan, it doesn't seem that Hugh and Stephen are entirely convinced by your reading. And even more interesting, many people in our audience tonight thought that it could be them as well. What explanation could there be for that, do you think?
Oh, a very simple one, that of course what we're testing here is my ability to communicate, and of course you must understand in the newspapers I specialize in saying things that do apply to a lot of people at once.
Well, from my experience, readings in newspapers are very general, and perhaps that's why in America some of them now carry a health warning, which makes it clear they're for entertainment purposes only. Thank you very much, Jonathan, for taking part. Stephen, thank you.
On this Monday afternoon, joining us now, James Randi, the amazing Randi, who has spent his good part of your career just debunking people like Uri Geller and others self-proclaimed as... How can I... Do I call you James or...
Well, first of all...
the amazing or what?
Just call me in time for lunch. No, I am not a debunker, and I don't take that title lightly, Tom, because if I were a debunker, I would start these investigations with the idea, this is not so, and I'm going to prove it. I can't afford that attitude, so I'm an investigator rather than a debunker, if you don't mind.
So you keep an open mind. You're willing to
absolutely
see that if it's well documented that some of these things...
There have been cases where if I had gone in and said, hey, this is something phony, watch this, I would have been put right on my rear end on the floor pretty fast, because a couple of the things that I've investigated have turned out to be most interesting.
Legitimate?
Yeah. Yeah.
Anything dealing with the faith healing department?
No, not with the faith healing, and not with anything psychic, but some of the abilities some people have are really astonishing. A young man who can multiply 5 or 6 digits by another 5 or 6 digits in his head instantly, faster than you can enter them into a pocket calculator. I mean, that kind of stuff really floors me, but there are good reasons why it happens, and we understand it. It's not a mystery.
You call the folks who go to faith healers, and by faith healers, we're talking about the Oral Roberts, the Pat Robertson, Roy Masters, who'll be out later, Popoff, and there's a priest in Massachusetts.
Father Ralph DiOrio, yes.
Right. You call them faithful moths flying into a deadly flame.
Well, I call their victims the moths, actually. I regret to have to say that, Tom, but I'm afraid it's true. So far as I've been able to determine in investigating literally hundreds of cases where people claim they have been healed, or where healers claim that they have healed their subjects, let's say, I have not found one genuine case of healing. Now, I do get lots of anecdotal stories. Oh, there's a lady in so-and-so, such and such, did this, that, and the other thing, and immediately she grew a new leg, or she was cured of diabetes, or whatever. You hear these stories, when you follow up on them, they turn out not to be quite so. And in 99% of them, you can't get the medical evidence before and after. You can't even get the name of the people. No one has any documentation.
Now, you allude to even Lourdes as a place where we've led to believe that a lot of healings go on.
That's
People
right.
go there with all kinds of illnesses and come away cured and renewed in the spirit. Not any documentation there?
Well, they certainly do come away renewed in the spirit. There's no question of that. But this kind of thing is only temporary. It's something that gives people maybe a little more reason to live, but then if you change your brand of peanut butter and believe that that's going to do it for you, that's just as good, and it doesn't involve anything supernatural.
For people, what I find amazing, I happen to be watching television Sunday morning for a bit, and Oral Roberts' son, Richard was on. And Richard was healing people. It was during the healing part of the show, and he was talking to the viewer, and he was saying, there's somebody out there with emphysema, and then he'd stop and go, yes, Lord, right, Lord. It was like the Lord was talking, interrupting him, and he was then going and healing people out there.
That's right.
That looks so blatantly theatrical to me that I find it hard to believe that there are people actually being harmed by that.
Well, if they think about it for a minute, what you're really saying, or what Richard Roberts is saying in this case, is that suppose God is busy in the Mediterranean saving a boatload of drowning nuns or some such thing, and right in the middle of it, he looks at his celestial watch and he says, whoops, Richard Roberts is on the air. Sorry, girls, got to go. And across the world he goes, and he says, Richard, were you speaking to me? Yes, Lord. This kind of thing. Now, what people don't realize, and this is really astonishing, with Pat Robertson, for example, one lady claimed that a fracture of her ankle was healed, and she gave testimony on the show via videotape. At the time that Pat Robertson broadcast that videotape, he knew something the lady didn't know. That at the time he pointed at that TV camera and said, be healed, that woman out there is healed, she no longer has that problem. That was 2 weeks before she broke her ankle. That's the amazing thing. And Robertson knew it and didn't trouble to tell his viewers that. And that's what happens with Oral
So in other
Roberts
words, instead of curing her, if he had that sort of precognition, he could have got on the phone and said, look, you're going to break your ankle if you don't watch out.
Yes.
You might want to avoid X, Y, and Z.
Well, the point is that she believed it was in real time. When she saw the videotape being broadcast, she thought it was real time. He's really pointing out of the TV set at that second, while it had happened 2 weeks before.
Let's take a look at a cure going on, or what we are led to believe is a cure going on. This is a more extended tape of what you saw briefly in the show Open. This is with Peter Popoff, I believe,
yes.
Right? Okay, let's take a look.
Are you ready for God to overhaul those knees? Oh, glory to God. And I tell you, God's going to touch that sister of yours all the way in Sweden. It's going to be because of your prayer. Right now, Jesus, oh, hallelujah. He's not going to need anymore. Glory to God. Woo. Oh, hallelujah. Get up on your feet. Let's walk.
There's no pain.
What?
There's no pain. 12 years. There's no pain.
Take off and just start running. Look at that. There he goes. There he goes. Hallelujah. Praise God. How many of you know that burns the devil up? Oh, glory to God. I tell you.
What were we seeing there?
We were seeing a postman named Don Henvik from San Francisco, who has been healed now by 11 different faith healers in nine different diseases in 7 different cities and under 2 genders. Because as Bernice Manikoff, this man was healed of ovarian cancer twice by 2 different prominent healers, and he now has the healthiest ovaries of any postman, certainly in San Francisco, I can assure you.
So he was working with you?
He was working with me, and we had to do that for a good reason, Tom. It's not just to send a fake
Here he
in.
is with his other
Here he is as
getup,
Bernice
yeah.
Manikoff, yes. Fetching lady indeed. I don't know, he doesn't make a very good woman. However, Don did this, and several of our other people did it. We've got them out doing the same thing with W.P. Grant this very day, as a matter of fact. The reason they do it is because the healers say that God sends them to the afflicted, identifies their name to the healer, as Peter Popoff did, and we exposed the gimmick he was using, and all of them, as a matter of fact, almost all of them, with the exception of Pat Robertson, who've done this word of knowledge thing where they actually call people by name. The information is gained from them in advance. Now, if God is giving them this information, God must be wrong, because that man's name was not Virgil Jorgensen, as he said it was there, nor was it Bernice Manikoff.
But for all the only danger I see in doing that, for all the people who saw that on television and who believe that that man was really cured, only a small percentage maybe are hearing that he was really a plant, it was all a put-on.
Very true.
It's proof that God didn't really direct Peter Popoff. So all the other people are finding that as more credence to believe in this guy.
It's unfortunate that he used that piece on his television broadcast, because we did it just to prove.
Yeah, but he'd be a fool not to. I mean, it was
Oh,
very
it was a good case. In fact, he's used Don Henvik a couple of different times, and the last time as a woman, as Henvik rose out of the wheelchair, Mrs. Popoff, via her secret transmitter into Popoff's ear, that's how she was getting the word of knowledge. Actually, it was not God speaking to him, it was his wife. She said, wait a minute, that's the guy from Anaheim, which is the tape that you just saw there. So he finally, he gave it away by his gesture.
That was, and apparently we don't have that tape, or the quality is such that we could not air it, but I have seen the tape before of Popoff going through the crowd and hearing his wife's direction. My question is, if these people, for whatever reason, if it makes them feel as if they are in fact better, if they find some sort of spiritual awakening in these experiences, what's the harm?
The harm is very positive, Tom. The harm is this, that they go with some minor problem to the faith healer. Migraine headaches, arthritis, whatever. They get some sort of temporary symptomatic relief or a placebo effect, and that's what it is in many, many cases. In fact, in most cases. They get that kind of relief. Then they go back later, when they didn't have to see a doctor this time, and suddenly it's a terminal case or it's something very life-threatening. They go back again and they say, gee, and they follow what the faith healer said, and W.V. Grant has said this: God doesn't want to cut on your body with a knife. He doesn't want to put chemicals in your blood or in your stomach. He wants to heal you with the spiritual sword. They say, that's preferable. I don't want someone cutting on my body with a knife, so to speak. And they go back to the faith healer, and even the diabetic throw away their insulin, and they die. Now, they claim they heal diabetes, and these people believe them, and they end up dead.
You have gone to the homes of people who have been healed to interview them and found that they were no longer alive?
A terrible experience. In one case, we actually went to the front door after a week's appointment with this lady who said she was healed of cancer, and as they opened the door, the mortician came out, and they were wheeling her body out on a gurney covered with a sheet. And I tell you, that kind of experience, it really gets to you, especially with kids. Boy.
All right, we've got a presidential candidate running around saying he can heal you. We've got people like Oral Roberts saying he saw a 900-foot Jesus, and if you don't pay him $8 million by March, he's a goner. Why aren't these people, I mean, this is fraud of the high order based on what your research, why aren't they in jail?
Good question. And I am appealing, as I do in this program, and I do in this book, I appeal strongly to people who feel as strongly as I do about it, to write to their congressmen, write to their legislators, and ask them to do something about it. Because unless someone in a high position in government decides that this is something should be dealt with, they will not do anything about it. They sit on their hands because they say, oh, that's religion. That's not popular with the vote.
Currently one of Britain's most successful mediums, please welcome my next guest, Maureen Flynn.
Good evening, everybody. I hope to be able to make a link with someone here tonight and bring a loved one through from the world of spirit. I have been given the name of Taylor. Now, someone here tonight either is Mr. Taylor or the name of Taylor will have a close connection with you.
My mother's maiden name is Taylor.
Because you see, I have a gentleman here who links with that name very clearly. And he would have been quite elderly when he passed, and he passed with a heart condition.